Hey, fellow tennis nerds. I hope all is well. Today I have a distinguished guest in Meike Babel. She is a former pro, played really high level, Grand Slams, you name it, won some ITF titles. But she's also now a content creator and a pretty famous coach. So maybe you've seen her stuff if you're listening to this already. Welcome to the podcast, Meike.
Hey, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been looking forward. We've been trying to get this set up, but with time zones and everything, it's not that easy. How
Yeah,
busy are
time
you on?
zones.
How many hours are you on the court? Kind of.
Today it was just 3, and I'm actually trying to get off the court a little bit more and spend more time on the online side of things. So that's the most I can do these days because I'm getting a little older. So trying to get off the court a little bit more.
Yeah, how many hours? Like you're doing 30 or 20 or how
Good
much?
God, no. No, no, I'm at 15 now, 15, 16, 17. And that's all about that I want to do.
Because I talked to Tennis House, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, and he was still like 30 hours, which sounded a lot to me.
And he's in Louisiana. And
Yeah.
that's, I mean, the humidity, at least here it's dry, but it's also super hot. And yeah, yeah, not for me anymore. I've done it long enough. I'm good now.
How's your body feeling? It's holding up, or you have injuries lingering?
Um, well, the shoulder has always been my problem. I mean, that was the reason really why I had to retire. But now it's like every now and then I'm struggling with tennis elbow and just, yeah, physically. In the beginning of the summer, I did camp for 3 weeks, but only 3 hours in the morning. But then on top of everything else, and I was still, I mean, by the end of the day, completely useless and just like, dead. So yeah, no more than 15. I'm good.
I think that's a sensible approach. I think it shows maturity that you actually decide, okay, my body cannot take. I mean, you had a successful and pretty long pro career. Do you ever miss like competitive aspects of it? Like you would like want to go out and compete?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, it's literally where now I'm just like, oh, I used to be able to do this shot, or and now I'm not anymore. But the weird thing is, I never was as competitive as you would think you need to be to play world class tennis. But yeah, I definitely don't miss it. Now, if I want to do something physically, I'll go hiking or do something, but I really don't even hit for myself. Also, because if I were to serve, then my shoulder kind of falls off after, half an hour. So I'm good. Not that competitive anymore.
No, that's interesting because I always find that competitive aspect, like some people have it in spades and some people struggle with it, although they can still play excellent tennis. But it's like when it comes to competition aspect, how did that kind of your personality, not being matching perfect with tennis, how did that feature in your career?
I think there were definitely times when I should have pushed myself more and just didn't know where to get that extra energy from. Because, yeah, I mean, was I driven? Absolutely. But that last little, that last little bit sometimes was missing. Whether it was like, oh, am I going to, put another 10 minutes in practice when you're already about dead? Or on court in matches when things didn't go my way necessarily, like working through adversity. I think I definitely had missed opportunities on that. And I recognized that back then, but I didn't know how to deal with it necessarily. I think throughout my career at the end, I got better with it and I had learned more about myself and about how to deal with that. But yeah, I mean, I've had absolutely, fanatics basically in my peer group, and I wasn't up there with them in that kind of competitiveness.
Do you think you need to be a fanatic? I mean, these days it seems like it's even more competitive than ever was before. Like, do you think you need to be completely fanatic to be successful on ATP and WTA level?
I I mean, I always kind of jokingly said, you have to have a screw loose a little bit to play professional tennis because it's such a weird lifestyle and you're doing so many weird things at a very young age on. Yeah, I think you have to be a little fanatical. I mean, you definitely have to know that for a very short period of time, even if we measure it in decades, well, I mean, look at Venus Williams now, like 3 decades on court, so it's not that short. But that's not really the lifespan of a regular career. But you have like your 6, 7, 8 years, it's got to be all in. It's got to be all tennis, or yeah, I mean, you might as well not even try.
Yeah, I think that's the perspective you have to have. When do you work with any kind of competitive players, or you mainly work with intermediates and club levels? What's your coaching schedule like?
I mean, now, first when I moved to the US, I coached collegiate, and that was a very high level. But I just didn't want to travel anymore either. That was one of the things. You do that enough when you play pro. And then in Atlanta, I played with some higher level and worked with some higher level juniors. But now it's mostly really recreational players. I have one or two juniors that are now actually in college. But on court, I don't work with high performance players a whole lot anymore, because I also feel that unless I have a hitting partner, I think there are better options for them. And Denver is not necessarily the absolute hotbed of tennis, which is fine, because I enjoy working with players who want to get better, and I don't really care what the level is, as long as they're really into it. And most everybody that I have is, and I really appreciate that. And you don't necessarily have the crazy parents factor.
No, I know. I've talked about that a lot with other coaches, online coaches and stuff. Like the parent factor is such a big thing in tennis, especially when you have kids that they believe can be the next big thing. Sometimes erroneously, you would say, or it becomes like a big block in the whole process of the child. So did you make like a pretty clear decision early that you don't want to work with that kind of energy?
Yeah, I do have to admit, because it just takes on too much time. And I don't mind, when it's reasonable and when it's relevant and when it's respectful also. But I've had too many people tell me how to do my job. And I take intake, of course. I take feedback, of course. But, if somebody wants to be on court all the time and tells me how to run a practice, I'm like, why are you paying me money? It's like, if you think you know it better, then you do it yourself. And it just took up too much energy and too much effort, to be honest, and time. And that took the fun out of coaching. And the one kid that I worked with from age, goodness, like 13 on, and she's now playing Division III. Her parents were amazing. I mean, they literally basically dropped her off and picked her up, and when there were questions, they were open to discussions and or helping me out also how she had played at tournaments and stuff. But it was really, really fun, and that's why I was the only person I really coached for a longer time.
But I think it makes sense to be selective. Like, I think some people can't be selective, but if you have the luxury to be a bit selective, I think it also makes you smile more in your work.
Yeah, and I noticed that the times when I was forced to work with players, and some of the kids were also, I think the attitude was not really where it needed to be. And then it takes the fun out of it. And as you said, I am very, very privileged in that I can choose who I work with. I had some qualms in the beginning to literally say no, because as all coaches know, it's another $100 for another hour or whatever people charge, and it can be fairly easy money. But at the end, it's not that easy if you are, after 3 hours, after those people left, you're still kind of upset and angry and doing all kinds of things that you don't want to be doing anymore.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And you said that Denver is not really a hotbed of tennis. I think it's mainly like, Florida, California. That seems to be like key states in the US. How did you end up in Denver then? Like, from Germany to Denver, how was your kind of that transition?
There were a lot of in between. So I did leave Germany in 2000, actually, and I was in New Orleans for 3 years. And I went to school there. I got my degree first at Tulane, and then I transferred to Vanderbilt in Nashville. And then I spent about 8 years in Atlanta. And then I moved to Denver in 2016. My aunt used to live here. And I was just like so blown away by just the environment here. Everybody's very active, hiking, skiing, biking, walking, everything. And I was a little done also with the climate in the South, because it's just killing. speaking about doing 30 hours. So how Davor does it, I have no idea. So yeah, that was kind of like the roundabout way, and it was already starting to be a little bit more tradition. I want to have a little bit more life balance, kind of life work balance. So yeah, a very roundabout kind of way to land somewhere.
Yeah, but that's life, I guess. Like for everyone, you end
Yeah.
up in places you never imagine yourself being.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
guess since you're mentioning hiking and stuff, that's a passion of yours to be in the great outdoors besides being on a court all day.
If I do anything physical, I mean, when I was still teaching like 30, 35 hours or something, I was just happy to park my behind on the couch in the AC. But now that I have a little bit more energy also to do that, yeah, I mean, hiking is absolutely like, I mean, it's just amazing here. And there's so much to do. And I mean, you can, I think, spend a lifetime almost here in Colorado, and you never have to go to the same trail twice. It's
Wow.
just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So, I mean, you have the hiking part, but you're also now having an online presence, right? So you're on YouTube, Instagram. Do you do your own editing, or is that something you kind of give to other people?
I do all of it myself because I mean, I would love to, if I can be honest, I would love to maybe find somebody to edit. But I've tried it once or twice, and by the time that I get, to where I like it and where I'm okay with it, I have to write so many instructions that I might as well do it myself. And I did teach myself, and that's one of the things that I like doing. I like to learn and kind of challenge myself that way a little bit. So it's actually fun, but I mean, it's getting into where it takes a lot of time, and that's also one of the reasons why I want to transition off the court a little bit, because it's taken more time, but it's starting to be profitable, and yeah, I think it's a good time to make that transition.
You seem to really enjoy it. You create some really good content. Have there
Thank
been
you.
any challenges besides learning how to edit in like being in the online world compared to just coaching traditionally?
You have to deal with a whole lot of people who don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I know that.
I mean, if you read some of the comments, you're going like, "Did you watch my video? Did you what are you talking about?"
Sometimes not,
Um,
probably. That's how it is for me,
yes,
at least.
yes, and and they're making one categorical sweep about something. Um, I think being for the most part, I mean, there's a couple of women. It always feels like the regular stuff. You always have to do everything twice as well because you have to set yourself apart. And I'm very happy and or very very lucky, I guess, that I can immediately say like, hey, I was a top 30 player, so I guess that gives me some kind of credibility right off. But you have to back that up. You can't just waltz in there like a lot of players do. And this is more in the coaching, like, oh, I used to be a good player doesn't necessarily make you a good coach. And I think just the transition that you're not right there to correct somebody, so you have to find ways and different ways maybe from when you would teach a lesson in person to find that in an online space. Like, how do I explain that if I'm not right there? How can I break it down into manageable steps? But it's fun. I like doing it, and it's something new. And I do get to coach people that otherwise I would not ever meet because I'm also doing online coaching, like the stroke analyses, match analyses, or tennis consultation. I also do mental skills training, and you have a reach that is past anything you could possibly have in a live setting, unless your name is Bollettieri or Macy or whatever, or Maratoglu, whoever it is these days
Yeah,
with the
exactly.
big
Usually big
families.
names
Yeah,
creates like a huge team behind them, right? No,
yeah.
but like you mentioned, like that you could do online consulting and stuff like that. Do you feel like you can learn as well being online, or at least maybe 80, 75% as you are when you're face to face with you on the court actually playing?
I think it depends really on the learning style. It really depends on the person. I mean, for some people, I would reckon it is absolutely not suitable. I think you have to make sure that you speak literally the same language because language barriers can be a lot bigger. At least when you're on court, you can still show. But I've had really great experiences with it for the people that it's right for. I mean, for people that are very visual learners, that can, go out then and practice and experiment with it and then come back. But yeah, I think it's an absolute legitimate way of coaching, which I didn't necessarily would have thought 15, 20 years ago. But I think also now with technology so much more evolved, why not?
Yeah, I agree, 100%. And I think whatever you can get from something, I mean, if you can't go to someone, it's much better to do it online. Even if it doesn't give you 100% the same result,
Yeah.
it might give you a high percentage, and it's much worth and more than nothing, right? So, makes sense. And also something I usually tell people is like you should record yourself as well, because
Yes.
if
Yes.
they need to
Yes.
send you stuff, like sometimes I get videos as well. It's much easier when you actually have people recording themselves regularly. They're in that loop already.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, if I'm going back to, when I played, like filming yourself, you had to have like a camera that was, like what you now see on TV crews, and it was still the VHS, and it was expensive and impossible. So that's, I think, how we also kind of grew up making it a big deal. But now, I mean, it's ridiculous what you can do with the phone. And so to me, that's a fantastic way of learning.
100%. Do you see some issues pop up over and over again with like club level players that you coach, or juniors, whatever? Like that same thing is the most common problem or thing or misunderstanding?
Yeah, I think a lot is on the forehand with the lag and the snap, and that's when I start being very unhappy because there's no snap and the absolute. Yeah, how can I say that so you don't have to edit it out? Discussion
That's fine.
about the
Don't worry
ATP.
about it.
Yeah, the stupid discussion about the ATP and WTA forehand, and if you're at higher Division 1 level, we might get into a territory where a change there is beneficial. But if you're a rec player and you're getting into your contact properly, it's like, yeah, do a freaking cartwheel before you make contact. It doesn't matter. I think serving, the loading is very misunderstood. I think the serve is where the most myths have survived. And I think that's what I'm getting a lot, that people say, oh, but I heard you should push the left hip over the baseline, or it's like a pitch, or what's the other one? That's about the two that are the worst. And you constantly have to repeat that. And there is actually one online coach now who's very, very famous who propagates that. And of course, he's got the credibility of having coached, several number one players in the world. So you would think he knows what he's talking about. And then you talk to like some biomechanics people, experts, and they all go, no. So that's what you kind of have to fight against a little bit. But I think it's really the forehand is one thing, and the serve, and that's what everybody wants to work on, or mostly. When I do stroke analyses, it's mostly forehands and serves. It's hardly ever a volley. Backhands maybe some, but not a whole lot.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's an issue with people wanting to work on the sexiest strokes, or something like it's not. They might have the biggest flaw in their footwork, and footwork is not sexy. It's super boring, let's say, but it could make the biggest impact on their game overall. But it's not like you want to have most people seem obsessed with making like, 1+1 combinations, or like a big serve, and then they hit like an Alcaraz forehand winner, which few will do over and over again.
They do that maybe 1 out of 800 times. And that's something that you can tell your grandchildren about. That's great. But the 799 times that lose you the rest of the match, you don't want to do that. But I mean, I know that for myself, that I was more prone to work on the things that I was already good at, that I was confident at. But I was smart enough that I also worked on the things that were not sexy, as you say. And I absolutely agree with you. That's what everybody wants to do.
Yeah, it's almost like tennis has some kind of macho aspect to it. Like it's like you need to hit winners, and if you're not hitting winners, it's not like that's not cool. At least you see that on some levels. And then what wins you matches is the consistency, which is not the sexiest either, right?
And I mean, if you break it down, if you were to look at somebody like, let's take a Djokovic. I mean, he never misses. And if we go by the definition, somebody never misses, that makes him a pusher. No, he's just consistent. I mean, he just, and sets up his strengths. And of course he can put everything away then. But he's also not going to go and try to slap winners from 18 feet behind the baseline. I remember when I played, people were talking about Arantxa Sanchez Vicario as being a pusher. And I was like, have you ever hit with her? It's like, she has so much rotation on the ball. Like every ball is up here. She's not a pusher. She just never misses and then sets up her strengths. So I think also with, having more access to a lot of video and a lot of tennis on TV, that's what everybody sees, right? And you hear the commentary, oh, big serve +1. And it's like, yeah, but I mean, I can't do that. My serve is nothing, spectacular. So for me to work a whole lot on serve +1 with a big serve wouldn't make any sense. I have to work with my serve as a very placed ball. And then maybe I have a +1, +2, +3, 4, 5. Yeah, but you got to know what you can and cannot do.
Yeah, I think that's self-awareness in life in general, but also on the tennis court makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, it's my opinion at least, that the TV angle sometimes hurt players or people watching, who want to learn tennis, because it's always that same bird's eye view. And you don't see how much spin like Arantxa Sanchez Vicario puts on the ball, or kind of like how deep Djokovic shots are, because sometimes the commentators don't even mention it, but that's the key fact. Like he makes every ball for you you're uncomfortable hitting every shot, so it's a different game, right, for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's like, basically like trying to hit or do a dunk if you can't even do a layup. I hope that was a good analogy.
I think it was a good analogy, yeah.
With other sports. So yeah, it's like first do the basics. And I think that was something that I was very fortunate with, that my coaches really instilled that. And mostly it was really good fundamental technique. And then you can, start to use, then you can pretty much do anything, right? If you have really good technique and you got the patience and you got the endurance and stamina and whatever. But yeah, you got to build the point.
When you traveled on the tour, nowadays the teams are so big. Like they have physio, they have a food, nutritionist, they have everything. I mean, Djokovic probably has like a cryo chamber in a car somewhere outside. How was life when you played on the tour? It was quite different, no?
It was, I think with the teams, that's also now only the top 20 or maybe 30. But yeah, that was not the norm back then. And I do remember that I think Steffi was the first one who actually traveled with a physiotherapist. And I know that Jana Novotná was the first one, or not the first one, but one of the very, very few to travel with a hitting partner. So she had a coach and a hitting partner. And I had a coach. But also a lot of times not even that, and I traveled with my brother or a friend who could play tennis, yes, but certainly had zero qualifications to be a coach on tour. And it was very primitive, shall I say. I mean, you had to combine, you had to be your own physiotherapist, you had to be your own trainer, you had to have your coach, and he had to be the coach, the hitting partner, the psychologist, or that wasn't even a thing back then. So it was very rudimentary, should I say. And now in hindsight, I'm going like, wow. But that was just the best you could do, or I could do with what I had. And it comes down to finances, absolutely.
Yeah, tennis is a tough sport on the finances. And like you said, this is mainly like the top 10, 20, 30 players maybe can afford this huge team. Otherwise, you see, some guys in top 100 even travel. Most of them have one coach, but when I'm around ATP or WTA tournaments, they usually have one coach, but they don't have more than that. Like that's not so easy. And that's, obviously the cost then expand if you're going to have a team of 5 entourage,
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a little bit better. Also, I talked to a guy who ran the tournament in Karlsruhe, who used to be our Federation Cup team captain. And the things that the WTA now requires you to have to be able to put on a tournament, like you have to have a dedicated warm-up section, and you have to have so many bikes and so many physiotherapists have to be there. There has to be a doctor on call all the time, and there has to be whatever it is. So that also has gotten a lot more professional. And I think the WTA, the trainers there do a check-in every year, and they kind of, give you training regimes for especially the younger players that can't afford all that stuff. And that didn't exist when I played. It was like, well, go run a couple of laps around the park. That's your conditioning.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Like, I've been there's a German tennis school in Marbella where I live.
Yeah.
Not, I mean, it's quite far from where I live, but it's like 20 minutes or something. And I think he used to coach Steffi Graf. He was the national team Hofses, right?
Hofses, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, you see old pictures. You see like you have the feeling of like me growing up in the 80s as well. It's like things were very different, like in terms, especially like nutrition, training, and what you did to yourself. Like how was like how did you handle food when you were playing? Like was it like so stringent as it is today?
There certainly wasn't the information out there. It was all there. Do the carbohydrate, the loading with like the 15 pounds of spaghetti and tomato sauce. That was definitely one thing. But even if you had the information, it was sometimes really tough to actually follow that when you were traveling, because you stay in a hotel, you can't, fix your own food, you can't cook. I did try a lot of times to stay, in places that had kitchens, rent a house, but again, super expensive. Maybe a Grand Slam or something, you could split it with a couple of people. But you depended on whatever kind of restaurants were around. And of course, the higher the tournaments were, the better, the catering was and the food was, and also a little smarter. But you go to, the 25s and the 10Ks or whatever, especially like here in America, they go like, okay, yeah, there's the McDonald's and the whatever over there. And you just have to make do with what you had.
Yeah, and I think you need to kind of like you need to get through those stages. Like I have friends who are in the stages right now, so it's like McDonald's or something because they can't afford more than that, and the hotel room is like pretty bad, technically speaking. It's not going to be like a nice night if you're sleeping with party people in the room next door, or you're sharing a room even. So that's not so glamorous as some of the top pros.
As Netflix will have you believe. I think that's also why I haven't really watched it yet. I've seen a couple of bits and pieces, but of course everybody gets the wrong idea. When they see everybody driving around in a Ferrari and, being escorted, by 500 fans, and they have their private jets or whatever. And it's like, yeah, no, that's not really what it's like. Top 40 is on the men's side, we have the inequality in prize money that a top 100 or 80 guy can make a really good living. On the women's side, top 80 is not gonna do it.
Yeah, people don't really know that. I mean, like you have the Grand Slams now have like equal prize money, but then you had like this tournament in, I think it was Washington. I'm not 100% sure, but it's like the field on the women's side was much stronger. If you look at the rankings, it was like really tough, and then the field on the men's side was pretty mushy, and still the men's had like a double prize pool, So that was a little bit felt a bit strange, and it was also like brought up online, I think, a few times, right?
Yeah, and that's how it's been. And it I think on the women's tour also, the men had that at much lower stages, that hospitality was provided. That was, very few tournaments did that. And now, of course, the prize money in the first round, I remember that going to Australia, I think it was first round, if you got just to participate, you got 14,000 Australian dollars. But you had your coach, you had your own, travel to take care of. You're traveling halfway around the world. The $14,000 was chewed up immediately. You hadn't even set foot in the country. Now I think it's like 40,000. So if you're now getting into, all the tier 1000s, you're coming ahead at the end of the year. But if you have to play the smaller tournaments, it's very, very, very unequal still, or unequal.
Yeah, for you, how was dealing with all the traveling? Was it something you liked, or was it something that, was tough to deal with?
I'm very much a homebody. I mean, I'm very much, and I was very fortunate that in my hometown, when I grew up, there were really, really good players. So I was able to train very long in Frankfurt. I mean, there were really good players and decent coaching. So I didn't have to go anywhere to live there. Like Medvedev had to move to Spain or France or wherever he went, and what so many players are doing now. But the travel was absolutely my least favorite part because especially if you're not one of the top players. I mean, you're flying. What did they do? Like 3 times around the globe per year or whatever it is, and you're back in coach. Like when you go from Germany to Australia 2 times 10 hours, and it was not fun. And you stay in hotels that are not necessary. I mean, again, lower levels at the beginning of my career, that were a little better than hostels maybe. That definitely was not my favorite part. And everybody goes like, oh my God, you were in so many places. Like, yeah, I saw the airport, I saw the tennis facility, and I saw the hotel. That's pretty much all you do.
Yeah, I have friends used to play pretty high level ATP, and they say like the traveling without ever actually traveling was the big pain, right? Because you're actually in a place that could be very interesting, but there's no time. And so you're just playing. It's just all about the tournament, and so that's not really traveling the way you see traveling from a normal person, right?
Yeah, and it's you're a business person. I mean, it's like, think about any person who has a job where they have to go to conferences constantly and they're not staying around, half a day to do sightseeing or whatever. And I always, when I was done with the blocks of tournaments, I wanted to get the heck out of there and go home and hang out with my friends and not deal with tennis anymore as much.
Yeah, I think it's also that part of like people don't realize like you're a small business owner, so you're the CEO of your own little venture, and also expenses are dealt by you. And I mean you can have a money team as well if you're a big shot, but generally like you have to pay taxes for prize money and stuff like that. How did you deal with that? That must have been a tough one.
I was very fortunate that at the very beginning, we actually found a private sponsor that allowed me to not necessarily think about it as much, but you still did a lot, because even that didn't cover everything. I did have support from the state federation to an extent, so I was really fortunate that way. But yeah, as you said, you have your own kind of little company. So I had help with, from a tax expert, but I had to deal with that, right? I had to, get all my documents in a row, and you have to figure out some immigration things if you needed a visa or something. Now, of course, that is all taken care of by, the big shots at IMG or, whoever your agent is, and they deal with all of that. But yeah, if you were at the level that I was, you had to do everything. I had to organize my own practice. I had to find my own practice partners, find my own coach when I, was switching or whatever it was. It's all on you. And you start doing that soon, like fairly early on. I was 16 when I turned pro. So I always kind of kid a little bit when I say like, yeah, I had my first career when I was 16, and by then, 26 or, now maybe even 45 or whatever, I'll start a new career with the online stuff. But yeah, and those can be absolutely distracting things too, because you'd rather want to spend time on the practice court or in the gym or whatever, and then it's like, oh no, you got a tax meeting.
And how did you deal with the pressure? I mean, it must be a lot of pressure to be, a young professional tennis player, because you have your own pressure. Potentially, you have pressure from parents. I don't know your situation, or your sponsor. There's always a lot of pressure and a lot of things for a young person to deal with.
Yeah. My parents were great. I mean, my dad was my coach when I started, which that wasn't the best dynamic, but they never made me play. Like, they never forced me to play. There was never any pressure. I think my mom actually told me like a couple of years ago, she wished that I had not turned pro, because she saw how tough the life is and how miserable sometimes I was. I mean, you're so young and you're being thrown into these situations that usually, like, it's your life. I mean, this is your livelihood, and you're 16, 17, where usually you're still allowed to be super dumb. You know, normal people maybe face that stuff, the type of decisions that you have to make when they're, I don't know, 25, maybe not even then. And it's most, I mean, I think I can speak for everybody that I talked to, all my peers, that after we were all done, we were all saying the same things for the most part. It was mostly our own pressure, because you put all your eggs in one basket. Like, you quit school. I quit school. I got out of school after 10th grade. Yes, I continued kind of what back then was homeschooling. I guess now it's called online school. But that was it. Like, when other people are still kind of figuring out what they're going to do with their lives, boom, you got to do this. And you've done this for so long already. Like, I mean, I was a late bloomer, so I wasn't even like as good in tennis and as involved with tennis as some other players. They were like, I don't know if you remember Anke Huber.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, she was I mean, we're the same age. And she already won the German championships and went to all the junior Grand Slams when she was 12, 13. So she had already done all this for like 4 or 5 years. And I only started to really get quite good when I was 14, 15. So I was a little later. But that's all you know. And then if that doesn't work out, what does that say about you? I mean, what you think, what will it say about you as a person? Doesn't say nothing. You know, if you're not making it as a pro, you're still an okay person for the most part, unless, you know, whatever, you're an idiot. But it's so soaked up into your identity, basically, that's where the pressure comes from. I mean, for most everybody, it was themselves. Yes, some had absolutely nutty parents, but for the most part, it was all us.
Yeah, I know. Also, like that thing where you don't have any backup plan. Like sometimes, you know, I talked about that with other coaches, like going to U.S. college, for example, tennis college. It's a great idea. Big thumbs up. I would like to hear your opinion there as well. But it's like that at least gives you an education, and then you can go pro, which some do, and successfully so, right? But if you're going from, you know, I'm a child and now I only know tennis. It's like you're raised in a bubble. You have this bubble life, and you don't know anything outside it. And if it doesn't go as planned, you know, what do you do? Who are you? You know,
you still become a tennis coach. Yay!
This is true.
Yay, coaching. No, I think that's absolutely right. The problem with me was, at that time, people told me I was too old to turn pro when I was 16.
Very old.
That was the time. That's super old. I mean, Anke was already, I think, top 50, I want to say, when she turned 17. So, you know, you have her, and then you had Steffi, of course, who was top 50 when she was 13. Then Jennifer Capriati was so all these like absolute phenomenally anomaly. I mean, just like, that's not normal.
No.
But people thought like, oh, you have to like turn pro when you're 14. So I had that going. Thankfully, that has now kind of changed a little bit. The age restrictions are a lot. I think they changed that also to kind of push players to start a little later. But yeah, I had already left school. And I didn't know anything about college. But when I then, you know, or when you now look at who were my peers in the US here, they had all played college. Every single one of them and other players also, not just Americans, but who was it? Lisa Raymond, Nicole Arnold, Debbie Graham, Meredith McGrath. I mean, there were so many. If you read through the lists from back then, from all Americans, they all played. They all played college, which we didn't know about that. It's only now, I think, in the last 20 years that, oh, that's really a good option. And I would wholeheartedly recommend that to everyone, because you learn so many skills that you need when you play pro. You learn time management. There is still the aspect of team, so you have that, oh, it's not just all on me. You get the education, absolutely. And now some of the better colleges are actually allowing you to play pro. I mean, to play pro tournaments in the summer. For instance, Diana Schneider, who played at North Carolina, and I think now she has turned pro. She went to school and played at the Australian Open, or last year at the U.S. Open. So that tells you something about the level. And she's now in the top 60. And I think on the men's side, it's the same thing. And you have plenty of examples. So I think that's an absolute valid route to go.
Yeah, it makes sense. I remember, like, back in the day, I think as you were alluding to, like, as on the WTA tour, you felt like you had to be 15 or 16. I mean, there was this Martina Hingis as well, like, that came a bit later, but it's like you have to be this, kid prodigy. Well, on the men's tour, it was more okay. It's okay that they are a little bit later because they need more physical strength and whatever. And now maybe that's changing a little bit as well, because now you have like 18-year-olds that are super physical, like Alcaraz and whatever, and they break through really early. And while on the WTA tour, maybe it's a little bit later now than it was back then, or at least the requirement to go pro, right?
Yeah, I mean, but they changed, they adjusted the rules to that. I mean, I did have age restrictions. I remember that I don't know how many tournaments you could play, like WTA tournaments, maybe 6 events, and then you have ITF tournaments and whatever. But they definitely increased the number. Like if you look at the couple of kids that are now coming up, Mira Andreeva, I'm not even sure I think she's still 16. She still has restrictions. She can't play full schedule. And I think it makes sense. I know that there's other people that said, like, well, you can get around it. Like Coco Gauff got around it basically a little bit because she played exhibitions at a very high level. But I'm still thinking that's not introducing you full time to the craziness of the tour. I think she was still able to have a little bit more of a base somewhere and not travel. Yeah, what was it? Literally, I want to say like 48 weeks out of the year. That's what it felt for me, at least, or 40, whatever. I mean, it was way too much.
Yeah, and also I think, I mean, the toll on the body, like I'm seeing that now. If you follow the tours, ATP or WTA, like some guys or girls, they play every week. It seems like there are no breaks, even though they made some like decent money, so they can take a break technically. Yeah. But it seems like they don't allow themselves to take a break, whether it's the agent or themselves or the coach. But it's just like every week, new location, new regime, more matches, more strain on the body, technically speaking, should be. And it's like becomes a bit senseless. And then you see the crazy increase in injuries, which statistically, I don't know 100% how much that is, but it must be a quite significant increase in injuries.
Yeah. And I mean, go a step before that. I mean, I'm not quite at the top of the junior game anymore, but 5-6 years ago, I was still like one of the regional coaches for the USTA. The type of injuries that you used to see much, much later when I played, hip injuries, knees, people that were 22, 23 or something, now 11, 12-year-olds have hip issues, knee issues, because they already start so much so much earlier, and they're also so one-minded, right? They're only in tennis. I played basketball until I was 14. I mean, not very good, but I still, did something else. So just the early specialization and then the intensity and the volume. We don't even see the numbers that drop out before they even ever make it somewhere on TV. Even look at the challengers or the 25s or something, like before there, so many people are dropping out because of injuries. And but I think a lot of it has to do, people see this like, oh, you're going to be a gazillionaire, right? You're going to be like the Netflix people. And it's like, no, not so much.
No, I think it's like having, I saw some speech by Rafa at his academy where it's like he told everyone pretty much flat out, like, most of you are not going to make it. And by that, probably it's like 95%, even at a top academy or a strong academy, you can't give, I mean, you don't want to crush people's hopes, but there needs to be a realistic picture painted so you actually make some backup plans in your head at least, where you're not like a nutcase if you stop tennis and you have nothing. You're like, I'm a failure and I feel bad.
Well, you're gonna become a tennis coach.
Which is not for everyone.
Not the worst thing, which is not the worst thing to be, but not every good player makes a good tennis coach. You have to have a little bit of a mind for that too. But no, I agree. I mean, I find it always very, very interesting to see, when they talk about the junior Grand Slams and you go back to the draws 10, 12, 13 years ago, and you do see, of course, the players that make it. Right, you do see that Roger Federer won the junior Wimbledon or Iga won the junior Wimbledon, but then you read like who they played against and you go, who? So this was a player, I mean, it kind of came to me that one time when Roger against, I don't know who it was, but it's like, I've never heard that name. So that kid was in the Wimbledon junior finals. And it's not a guarantee that you make it. And to me, that's stunning at that level, and that's exactly what you say. I mean, it's not many people make it. I mean, how many people are even, have a ranking? I mean, that by itself is incredible. And I know that's gotten tougher since I played, because I think when I first got a ranking, there were 800 women ranked, and now I think now it's 3,000.
Probably, yeah.
And on the men's side, I'm sure it's very similar. But just the competition has gotten so much stronger. So it's as we said in the beginning, you have to be a little cuckoo.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's true. So how did you, when your pro career ended and you had your injury and everything, how did the transition to coaching? Was it easy, natural for you? I mean, you're pretty, charismatic, open-minded, open speaker. So it seems natural for you to create content, but then coaching can be another beast, right? So how did you take to that?
My number one was I need to get an education. So I had finished high school through those back in the day correspondence courses. It was all still paper, nothing online. That's how old I am. Oh, wow. Anyways, so I did graduate from high school in Germany, and that gave me the opportunity to study here in the U.S. actually, and that's kind of how I got into. And I got a scholarship as the assistant coach, coaching at Tulane first, coaching the women's team, and it felt that I had a really good access to the players right away, because I could also talk about other things than just forehands and backhands, because they do feel the same pressure. I mean, a lot of them were like, oh, my parents wanted me to have a scholarship and blah, and you're competing. And it's like, hey, I've been there. So it wasn't all about forehands and backhands. And I think that immediately kind of gave me a level of trust, which I think they gave to me, I gave to them. And it was kind of cool to help people along that way. And I think college also is a very different animal in that you potentially have a player for 4 years, and you can really, really help develop them. And then I did transfer to Vanderbilt, and I think I was super fortunate to work with Jeff McDonald there. And I would have loved to have him as a coach, because he really got the person. It wasn't about, I mean, we always kind of joked about it when it's match time, it's 10% about tennis and forehands and backhands, and the 90% was like, how are your grades? How did practice go? How are you with your parents these days? What's with your friends? And, how's life going? And you had to kind of manage the person and try to find a very specific way for each one of the 10, 11, 12 players that we had on the tour to get information across. And that felt pretty natural to me. And I got the feedback from most all of the players that's super helpful, to not just get in there and go like, hey, your forehand sucks, you need to do this and that and the other. It's like, hey, who are you as a person? And I think I carried that on into my regular coaching now. And I think I coach a lot more how I would have liked to be coached, because that was certainly not the way that we were coached.
No, I mean, that's great. Like this, I mean, I think that's also the learning a lot of, I mean, smart people do generally, is that like what would I have liked in this same situation? Yeah. And if you were in that situation, obviously you have a clear understanding of what that is. And then you can bring that. And I think for many people, like tennis is such a mental game. So having people feel good about themselves, or feeling good about their tennis or whatever it is mentally, it seems so vital today, especially, right?
Yeah. I mean, we always said, like with coach, we always said like a happy player or a happy person is a happy player, because then your mind is free. Like, I'm not worried about grades. I'm not worried about whatever issues college age people have. Whether we thought they were relevant or important or not doesn't matter. It's the perception of that player. So if, all the baggage that everybody has, they can leave that at the door when they step on the court, then we can talk tennis, right? Then they have the mental capacity. And one of the things that I really, really learned from coach also, he always said, like, you have to keep learning. You have to keep learning. If you still teach the same way that you're in 5 years that you're teaching now, you suck as a coach. So if I'm kind of now, I mean, I can still say a lot of things. Well, this is, really worked for me when I played, and, because some of the fundamentals are still the same, but tennis has changed so much since I started, since I stopped. You have to continually keep learning. And I'm very fortunate that is enjoyable for me. I like to learn.
What do you think is what would you say is your kind of main skill as a coach? Where do you think you shine the most when you have, whether it's like a strong junior or just like some complete club player?
Yeah, my sarcasm is unbeatable. I think one of the things is I can put people at ease. Like, I can establish that this is a enjoyable environment. Nobody needs to be threatened. Because I do know, people tell me, it's like, oh my God, I was so intimidated, getting on. And it's like, really? Me? I mean, when I'm on coach, I look like on court, I look like a beekeeper because I have all like sun protection stuff. I look like a total idiot. But I think I get to a human level right away that I can communicate. Here's some information, and I find a way to get that information across for different people. I think that's what I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah, good. You seem to be a good people reader, and I think the sarcasm helps. I'm a big fan of sarcasm, but it's also like having a sense of humor and self-awareness helps, because otherwise, like some coaches, also famous coaches, they seem to love themselves a bit too much. That it's like,
who are you alluding to?
No names mentioned, no names forgotten. But it's like that becomes a problem, because if your ego gets in the way of anything, the results diminish.
Yeah, and that I think puts a huge strain on the coach-player relationship. And I do know that with my personality, and I joke a lot, and yes, I am sarcastic, but I think I feel pretty well like who can take it and who kind of reacts to that. And I'm also in the position, if somebody doesn't like it, then it's like, too bad. I'm not going to completely change who I am, because that's just, how I am. I have enough people that, enjoy this and kind of benefit from it. And I'm not as bad, but I'm definitely not the typical German coach.
No, I think so. I played with some German coaches and stuff. I know. I would say that too. They're a bit sterner.
That didn't suck too bad. You weren't as bad as I thought you were going to be. I mean, literally, that's some of our coaches were like, if you didn't get yelled at, that was the best you could hope for. And that was not the most enjoyable thing.
That was a high five. Like, if they didn't say you were useless, that's good.
Yeah, if they didn't address you by name, or if they didn't yell at you, or I literally had a guy say to me, it's like, yeah, that didn't really suck today. It's like, oh, thanks. But as a German, you know how to take that a little bit more. But if I did that here, and I jokingly do that here every now and then, they all go like, really? Yep, that's how we did it.
Yeah, Americans are usually a bit more literal. So sarcasm doesn't always work, because they feel like they're, that just went over their heads or whatever, because it's more, which is just a different culture, but it's in Europe, you can be a bit sarcastic, and it works, but in US it's different. When it comes to like we talked about relationships, coach player, but when it comes to being on tour, do you still keep in touch with players you became friends with, or how does your tour life feature into your current life?
I still every now and then talk to some players, but not necessarily very highly ranked players. But we grew up together. One of my best friends at home actually is one of my childhood biggest nemesis. We hated each other, and now we're best friends, and we both don't know why. She dropped out fairly soon and she was at a very high German level, but she said like it's not for me, absolutely not for me. On tour, I know it's very different, or it sounds like it's very different, that there are some players that have really great relationships and are really good friends. I didn't have many friends just for the fact that I did not just want to talk about tennis. Like that, to me, it was such a bubble. It's like I want to be focused on tennis when I'm on court, when I talk to my coach, but after that, I don't want to talk about tennis or shopping. And that, I know this sounds a little stereotyping people, but the intellectual level was not necessarily the highest, where I felt like, okay, this is really who I want to be spending my time with. Nobody was reading papers, and I was just like, what do you people do all day? They watch TV, and I was like, no, not so much. I did get along with a lot of people, and I guess when we trained or something, like I never had issues like finding practice partners or something, or went to dinner a bunch of times. But it's like that's about it. That's all I want to do. But now, in retrospect, I did talk to quite a bunch of players who were at the same time, and they said exactly the same thing. It's like they don't stay in touch a whole lot with other players because their outside lives are more important now. Because you've done this is it, move on.
Yeah, and I think I see that when I travel to some events like that. Players usually either they're with their team. Now you have teams, okay, so that's also changes things. But I thought there would be more like banter in between players, but it seems like it's a little bit, the competitive aspect of it kind of kills that possibility even of being proper friends, or actually like we're at the same city, 10 times a year or more, but it's still like you're not really hanging out, or you're not able to hang out, so it becomes a kind of weird friendship as well.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that's also, it's fostered by the media also a little bit, but it's also, I think, fostered a little bit by the coaches. I know that some of my coaches said, like, you can't be hanging out with them, because you're going to play them. Because as a kid, tennis for me was like my best friends. Like, I grew up in my club, and we had really good players, and those were all my best friends. So for me, it was always like, even when we, in the state federation, those were really my best buddies, and I would want to hang out with them, and we did, much to the chagrin of our coaches sometimes. But then once you get at the level where it's about prize money and it's about your livelihood, and that's it could be reflecting on your coach also, right? Because it's their livelihood also, and if you kind of muck around there and I don't know what you're doing then when you hang out with other people, that could take away from your concentration, or you're not professional enough, or whatever. So it is just hard. It's just a really weird lifestyle, to be honest.
Yeah, it is, and it's like it strikes me the more I've been around, like just traveling and with around the tournaments, and you're in the player rooms or player lounges, restaurants, and it's like it's such a strange atmosphere sometimes. It's like everybody's in the same room, but nobody's talking. Is that there's tension in there, even though there's no matches going on, right?
Yeah, I agree. And that was definitely when I started. That was intimidating out of the wazoo. My first bigger tournament where I experienced that was in Filderstadt. Remember where you could win the Porsche? Now it's in Stuttgart. It was a very intimate setting. It was at like some kind of smaller venue. Now it's a bigger venue and everything, but it was literally like a regular clubhouse, basically, like any kind of little bigger club. And there's Gabriella Sabatini, and there's Jennifer Capriati, and then there's Martina Navratilova, and you're coming in there as a 16-year-old. I'm like, don't mind me. Hi. So that was, to get used to that. And then I agree, it was everybody is in their own little bubble there.
Yeah, and also there must be an intimidation factor. Like if there's some legend, and then you're gonna you're drawn against them. Like, how does that, like, did you play any real legends and where you felt like, oh no, this is going to be bad just before you even went to the court? Like, it's hard to be
Oh
just
yeah,
zero.
plenty of times. I mean, the first, and that was actually at Filderstadt. I had a great experience actually. I played qualies and qualified, and had to play Martina Navratilova, number one in the world at that, and she had like 15 Porsches already. So we're in the waiting area, and I was shaking. I was literally shaking. I couldn't breathe. I was just the nerve-wracking. Yeah, it was horrible. And she comes over to me and says like, "Hey, I watched you play, and you're doing great. Just take a couple of deep breaths. We're gonna have fun out there. It's gonna be great." And I'm like, "What? Yeah, who? What?" And it did work. I mean, I played reasonably well, and that was amazing. I thought that was absolutely. Yeah, I don't know why she did it, but I thought it was super, super nice. But yeah, I mean, I played Martina Hingis once or twice. And, you always talk about you have to believe that you can win. Maybe that's where I was a little too introspective, or it's like, come on. I mean, she has to like tie a hand behind her back for me to win. So you have to be realistic. I mean, there was not. I had no chance, basically, and that I knew that before I went out on the court, to be honest. I mean, then it's basically you're just trying to not look like a total idiot. And I managed to, I think, do reasonably well. But yeah, I mean, there were a couple of matches where I was like, oh my God. But now I can laugh at it, but back then it was not quite as enjoyable.
I can imagine that. Like, yeah, it can be terrifying. Did you have any like specific highlights in your career that you think about even today that you're like, okay, this was like one of the best moments of my tennis career?
Yeah, I think Indian Wells in 98. I ended up playing Martina Hingis, and I did well. The score didn't necessarily reflect it. I know that always is a weird thing to say, but I beat two ranked players, Brenda Schultz-McCarthy, who I think at that time was 9 in the world, and did really, really well, and then somebody else. That was the biggest one, and I think then the proudest the match that I'm the proudest was probably at the French Open, winning against Helena Sukova, and I think she was top 10 at the time, 11-9 or something, or 12-10, 11-9, I think 11-9, in the third, when they still had the open sets, and that was something. That was one of the matches, I said that earlier, where I felt like I pushed myself, and I pushed myself through adversity. So that's something that I was really, really proud of. So that's a really great memory. And then I have to say it was all Bundesliga. Like it was all team tennis at home, because those were my friends. I mean, our team was not like bought together. I mean, those were all kids that grew up there and got good together, and that was a group of friends, and that was amazing. That was really, really, that was definitely a highlight of my career.
How important do you think team tennis is? Because sometimes I feel like that's one thing that a lot of players miss, like even guys like Kyrgios or whatever, they feel like they can't really shine in the single format, like they too much pressure, maybe mental anxiety, whatever. But when they play as a team in doubles or for your country or whatever, it seems to be relieving them and being able to play more freely for something else than themselves. How important is team tennis, and should it be more important?
I think to me it was hugely important, because I could kind of take the pressure off me a little bit on this. At the same time, it was an extra motivation, because it's like, hey, I'm also playing for them. But it was the good kind. To me it felt like good kind of pressure, especially when in a singles tournament you're on court 59 and it's raining and it's crap, and you're 5-2 down and you're going, okay, I might as well just like bag it. Now you're looking out and you're seeing your teammates. It's like, oh no, you gotta bust your butt here. I think it's good entertainment. Am I kind of sometimes thinking it's too much entertainment? Yeah, but I think Fed Cup, or Billie Jean King Cup now, Davis Cup, absolute fantastic opportunities for players, and I think also for fans, because you do see a little bit of a different dynamic. And I'm not very happy with the Davis Cup format now. It's like nobody cares anymore. As a kid, I was the ball kid once or twice in Frankfurt, actually, when I was like 9, 10 or whatever. And just the atmosphere there was just amazing. I mean, that was when Boris was, at the top of his career, and Michael Stich, and those were matches where you're like, wow. And you don't have that anymore with that new format. It's like nobody cares. I don't care anymore. Maybe some.
Yeah, I think that's the issue. It's like you change something, because if you look at the Grand Slams, like they are historical tournaments that've been the same pretty much, for so long, that it creates like a huge tradition, and people love traditions, right?
Yeah.
And you had the same with Davis Cup. Like, okay, you have that like very decisive doubles. 5 sets was dramatic in that sense, and it had huge tradition. And then when you change it, that just evaporates, and you can't you have to rebuild. You can't use the brand name to sell a new product. That's the weird thing.
Yeah, I agree. And think back to the matches, Germany against Sweden. I mean, we stayed up all night, however long it took, right? Becker against Wielander in Munich or whenever that was. I mean, those were matches that was like, wow. But yeah, now they're playing in I don't know where, and I agree. I mean, they should have probably rebranded it somehow, but it's definitely not what it used to be.
No, exactly. I think there's always ways to do things differently, but it's as that when you take something that it's so traditional and so ingrained, you have to treat it with a lot of care. And I think that's maybe where they fail. I think they just like, okay, let's just fix this with some money, and we hope for the best. And that's a shame, because then you can't get it back.
Backfired. Yeah. Backfired slightly. Yep.
Yeah. So coaching life now, and then going to content. Do you want to be doing more content, or you want to be, you find a balance there, or do you have another career in the, you want to go on TV, commentate, or where do you see yourself?
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to doing commentary if they can, deal with a sarcastic German. I think that ship has sailed, because I didn't make enough connections when I played. That was maybe one of the downsides of me being actually fairly introverted. I know I don't come across necessarily that way, but I didn't do the political side well enough. I didn't kind of get the connections that would have enabled me to kind of get into that side. Also, it would mean more traveling, but no, I think that I want to find a balance where I can be on court 6, 7, 8 hours a week and really enjoy that. And then the content creation is really interesting for me. It's fun. I think the mental skills things is something that the mental skills coaching, I'm working on an online course. So those are still avenues, I think, that I haven't even looked at a whole lot, to be honest, because that's definitely one thing that not a whole lot of people can offer, because they don't necessarily have the training. I do have the training and also the experience to back it up. I can tell people, you feel that way, because I felt that way. At least in tennis. I think it's kind of getting maybe a little bit more into a mellower stage of my life. I've done working since I was 16, and I'm maybe I'll go towards retirement a little bit more now.
Finding a good balance of hikes and tennis and some content, I think.
Yeah.
You never know what happens. That's the fun thing, and especially now when everything's moving so fast. But I think knowing how to edit videos is always handy, and being in tennis is an interesting way. I mean, you mentioned it as well. I think like if you don't network, obviously that's a problem. You have to play the politician a little bit, and then if you're if saying something and some people are easily hurt, which is silly, but it's how it is, so.
Yeah.
You have to play that
the
game as
delete
well.
button is for. Delete.
That's good when you edit. It's good that you can edit out stuff if you want. Those helps.
That too, yes. I got really good at that, especially if I'm doing lessons that I show or something, because I do have sometimes, PG-13 or R-rated commentary when I coach. I was got to be a little more careful on that side.
Yeah, you don't want any strikes from YouTube. They are easy with the strikes. I've heard. I haven't received any, thankfully, but it's, you never know.
But you learn, and I mean, I still enjoy it, and I think there's so many more things that I can do with it that I'm not too worried that I don't, spend as much time on the court anymore.
How is the situation with pickleball in Denver? Is it like still like growing like the plague, or is it? I don't want to bother you too much with this topic, but I had to ask.
Let me put it this way: I don't dislike pickleball, the sport. I mean, I played it a couple of times, and it is fun when you play with people that are your level, and it's a fun thing. But it's, I mean, I looked at the tennis channel yesterday or a couple of days ago because I was like, okay, I have an hour of free time, and why not check out what's on? And then there's pickleball in there, and then I literally see and there is a pro tournament actually in Denver at the place that I used to coach. And that was a little better with how they made the transition, and the infrastructure wasn't the way that it should be to add as many pickleball courts, whatever it was. But you literally see a dude with a beer belly playing something, and that's a pro. And to me, that doesn't gel. It's like, that's not, I'll just leave it at that, I think. So I think it's a phenomenal sport for getting people engaged, getting people exercising. It has a very low entry level. Basically, everybody can play it. I think for that, it's great. But I think I am a little bit with Martina Navratilova. If you like it so much, build your own courts. Because
100%.
We're losing a lot of tennis courts that way, and it cuts into my livelihood. It cuts into a lot of tennis coaches. And I do think it's, for the level of where you can call yourself a pro. I'll leave it at that. Next topic.
Yeah, I think it's good. Good. Politically correct there. That was perfect.
Excellent.
No, but I'm the same opinion. I'm like, I have nothing against it because people exercise, especially if you have a beer belly, it makes sense to exercise, and maybe not go pro. But it's a problem when it kind of affects other sports. It's like, so do your own thing. And I do see transition into tennis from both paddle, which is big in Europe, and pickleball. So there's a point there, but don't draw extra lines on my tennis courts, please. This would be my opinion. I don't like these extra lines.
Build your own, or do throw down lines, or. I mean, honestly, it's like you can play it on the street here. My streets are nice enough that, and I've done it. I mean, during lockdown, we played pickleball on the street here, or in the parking lot across the street, or in the park there. But yeah, don't claim that the courts that are being taken over by pickleball are not used by tennis, because it's a different population, it's a different demographic. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I have to ask you this because I have a lot of racket nerds listening, probably, or at least watching the content generally. Yeah. So do you have a lot of questions about gear? I mean, I think there's an over-obsession with gear because you can hopefully buy away your problem. So people want to buy a racket that hits the ball for them, so they don't have to do it themselves. Yeah. And that's become like a thing that people just over-emphasize the gear.
Yeah.
Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people ask me questions that are so detailed that I'm just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I know which racket doesn't hurt my arm. I know which strings don't hurt my arm. I know nothing about pulley, gut, main. I mean, I sort of have a clue, but I definitely don't have enough knowledge about it to recommend very, very detailed things. And I mean, when I played, absolutely, because that was one of the things that you could control, and anything that you can control, you, to my mind, should control when you play. But exactly what you were saying is like the racket's not going to hit for you. Like your racket is not, for most of the players that ask me these type of questions, like the racket is not your problem. There's other things that are more important for you to work on, and or fix or invest in, or whatever you want to call it, than the racket and the strings. They can help, but if you have terrible technique, it doesn't matter what racket you have.
And now I have to ask a follow-up question. Like, so when you played pro, what racket and string did you use, and what do you use now?
I was always a Wilson girl, the Wilson Pro Staff, and the strings were ISO Speed. I think it was an Austrian company.
Yep.
Now I'm with Yonex, and it's the Yonex. I'm actually kind of going back and forth between 3 rackets now because I can't make up my mind. The V-Core Pro, the E-Zone, and then the regular V-Core, the red one. And now they're coming out with a new one, and it's like, I don't know. And then the Yonex Rexis Comfort. That combination, either one of those 3 rackets with that type of string seems to be the best for my arm. And that's all I care about these days.
Yeah. So you've had arm problems over the last couple of years, or?
Yeah. So my shoulder was really the reason I had 4 surgeries, and now every now and then I do have tennis elbow, although it's not my technique. Hopefully, I'm claiming I'm getting old, so I'll go with that. But yeah, that's all I care about these days. I'm not I don't need another 5 miles on my forehand. I need control, and I need to be able to basically not look or think about my own strokes because I focus on my client.
Yeah, I think that's very sensible. You have a one-handed backhand. What do you think of and it's very nice one. So start there. What do you think of the future of the one-handed backhand in the game? On the women's side, it's not very popular. There are some very beautiful ones. I think Diane Parry is one of them.
Yep.
And Henning Hardan was one of my favorite players to watch.
Yeah.
But it's even on the men's side now, it's guys like Alcaraz kicking up balls. Denis Shapovalov has to jump and hit impossible shots. What do you think of its future?
We'll probably always see a few players do it because they are so talented that they can do it. On the men's side, probably a little bit more, because I honestly have to say that guys are given more freedom to choose what they want. On women, on the girls' side, it's you're too weak. So you start with a 2-hander, and to an extent it makes you successful quicker. And I'm literally going with little kids, 5, 6 or whatever. We're not talking successful like winning tournaments or something, just making contact with the ball. That's what I'm going for. And it's easier to replicate it more consistently with less aberrations. So that's what they then end up sticking with. Most of the players that I know have a one-hander. They actually started with 2. I don't know about Tsitsipas, for instance, but Dominic Thiem had a 2-hander. I had a 2-hander until I was 12 or 11. So it definitely was easier in the beginning, especially when you're not as strong. And it doesn't matter whether you're a boy or a girl, you're not very strong at age 9, 10, 11. So a 2-hander will enable you to be more successful, just keeping the ball in play, or then also being more powerful. So I think there will always be some, but I don't think we'll ever go back to teaching just the one-hander. That's done. I would be super happy if we please start teaching the slice again a little bit more. But that's the same kind of things you don't see world-class players slicing all the time. It's yeah, but have you seen people who can slice, how successful they are? Ash Barty.
Yeah, Ons Jabeur has a good slice as well. And even on the men's side, you have guys like Dan Evans who uses the slice, so I would say 90% and wins good matches,
Yeah. So that's, on the men's side, it always feels that they can at least deal with the slice. On the women's side, not, because it is that stupid sexist stereotypes you don't need a slice. And the slice is difficult to teach. Absolutely. It's very frustrating to teach for the coach and for the player because it takes a long time. So why would I invest as much time in a shot that I hit maybe every 20th or maybe never in a match if I can just tee off with 2 hands? Well, yeah, but that's going to make you very limited. And if you are the person who can deliberately use the slice, hello, Ons Jabeur or Marketa Vondrousova, which thankfully, now you have 2 players at the top of the game winning big titles that have that style. So I think that's hopefully coming back. Or Karolina Mukova. That's the beautiful game. Absolutely stunningly beautiful game.
Yeah, variation is the beauty of tennis, I think. So the more you can teach variation, I think that's also where the game hopefully is heading, and not stereotypical stuff, but actually the more variation you can bring to the game, you have more options, more weapons, then you're going to win. So hopefully that's the case. I want to thank you a lot. I know you're a busy woman, so big thanks that we managed to get this set after a few reschedules because of different time zones and whatnot. being very good. Like, you're an excellent speaker, very interesting to listen to, and refreshingly honest as well. I like that.
You don't have to bleep anything out. I was under control. You don't have to go beep. So
There
we're
won't be
good.
bleeps.
Excellent.
Well, you have a nice day now, and we keep in touch, okay?
All right. Thank you so much for having me. Have a good day.